All right, folks, welcome to Inside the Numbers on a Monday. What are the odds will be tomorrow at its usual scheduled time, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is going to happen. Barnes had a scheduling conflict. There's just sometimes no getting around some of this. But I wanted to do an Inside the Numbers in lieu of it anyway at the time that people are expecting. What are the odds today? Because this will probably be one of many mini Inside the Number episodes. Like I told you, we're probably going to have to start moving to daily, if not damn near daily, because the numbers are coming in so quickly. Of course, where it's October 21st, and I want to give you like fresh, the numbers as fresh as that we have them. And it doesn't take 2 hours to do it, so there won't be 2 hour episodes when we do this, because the time really has to be spent doing the polling itself. But there's going to be so much that has to be answered, and there's going to be so much fresh data that we're really going to have to show you. We'll try to get to Florida. If we can't get to Florida today, we'll do it with Barnes tomorrow. He kind of wanted to do it with us anyway, because we have a long history of this. Robert and I have a very, very long history of fighting against the frauds and scammers. I don't know what else to call them. We're going to show you a couple of examples today of some really downright dishonest stuff, which just brings me to my point. All right, before I even get into the numbers and show you stuff. Locals, we had a quick brief thing yesterday. Wait until you see, what were we at? Like 80 interviews that were done yesterday when we had that 1 hour stream and about Pennsylvania, trying to target these Biden voters. We've been doing this for about a week, and yesterday we had like 80 when we spoke with locals. We're at 188 now. I will tell you this, McCormick, it's part of it is most definitely Trump's coattails, and I can prove it, and I will show you when the new overall Pennsylvania poll comes out. But McCormick took a lead. He did end up ahead when weighted yesterday. I was doing it around 9:30 at night yesterday, and McCormick took a single 1-point lead with leaners. This marks the first time that McCormick has led in any of the polls that we have done in Pennsylvania. Granted, when we first did a generic kind of like Bob Casey, Dave McCormick, who is Dave McCormick, right? When we first did that survey months and months and months ago, Dave McCormick was down 13 points, running like 15, 16 points behind Donald Trump. It's remarkable what has happened here. And there's no doubt you got to give his team, his ground game, his voters are amped. They're going to vote. We've now started to add the question of how are you going to vote, or did you vote already? And I'll show you that, actually. We're going to do another national, I think. Listen, I hate starting on Mondays. I don't know if I want to start it now today, but it's like, we're here. It's 2 weeks out. All right, 15 days. We are 15 days out, and it does take time to process the data. So I very well may start a national tracking poll today. All right, I'm going to see. We'll go look at the public polling project funds, what's left. But if we just did, I think everybody would be happy if we just did Pennsylvania and national polling, because, folks, if Donald Trump wins Pennsylvania, he's going to win the election. Well, again, let's stop with these fantastical scenarios that are just not grounded in reality. Okay. And anyway, I'm going to show you some really ridiculous examples of the desperation, because here is, and locals, you know what I'm going to say because we talked about this yesterday. As a pollster, I can never 100% tell you for certain what's going to happen. But I have polled Donald Trump correctly twice that he has been on the ballot. And that includes some of those states where we had Biden up, where after the votes were counted, it was like, maybe you could exploit indefinitely confined enough in Wisconsin to cost Donald Trump that state, right? Maybe you could exploit pipes bursting and mail-in bullshit enough to cost Donald Trump the vote in Georgia and in Arizona, right? You could do that for sure. Let's cut the crap. But for the most part, some states we overstated Biden support, some states we overstated Trump support. All were within the sampling errors. In 2016, obviously one of just really two people who polled the race nationally and in the battlegrounds correctly. That's it. And I'm telling you, in 16, it looked close. Even when Hillary had leads in some of the Great Lakes states, you would look at the undecideds and you would say, God, these voters are going to break for Trump. Plus, there are these like new or I haven't voted in a long time voters. they're going to come out, and I know they're getting screened out. We're even screening some of them out. And if we're wrong, like we were in Ohio, he's going to win, and he's going to win it by a much bigger margin than anyone anticipated. That's what happened. Going into 2020, COVID polluted the polling environment. The marketplaces of the panels and online samples were absolutely distorted by TDS people from Zoomers and professional class sitting home going, Orange man bad, Orange man bad. I want to take every survey in the world and tell you, Orange man bad. And it was very difficult, but you could still, if you knew what you were doing, and if you, I mean, it probably helped that I polled 16 correctly. But if you did, or at least corrected your problem from 16, you would know how to find engaged Trump support in 20, or at least be much more accurate than, say, the ABC News Washington Post poll, which came out with a load of horseshit today that we're going to dissect. All right. That is a disgrace to the polling industry. And again, just getting to the point here, this is not either of those races. All right. It's not. I don't think anybody with a straight face, including the scam artists at the Washington Post, could argue that Donald Trump is not stronger today than he has ever been, including 2016. He's more popular, and it's not exactly hard to find his support in all the wrong places, in places you would never expect his support to be. So instead, they're resorting to misleading people. I honestly have said this so many times now. For the first example, I have said it so many times that you have got to now just conclude that he's doing it on purpose. And with the one I'm talking about, of course, is Harry Enton. Now, maybe Harry's not intentionally doing this. I don't know how he couldn't, but maybe he's smarter than that. That's why I'm just this. I don't want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm sick of giving people in this industry the benefit of the doubt. He's too smart to know what he's doing. And then obviously media surrogates, campaign surrogates, and Harris's surrogates in both media, pretending to be journalists, and campaign operatives and surrogates, party surrogates. They're all pushing this talking point today, which obviously shows you the memo went out. Now, whether or not he knew he would be exploited like this is kind of irrelevant. He's misleading people, and we're going to tell you exactly why after we play the clip. I'm going to explain to you why. And like I've been saying last week, you better start telling people and being honest with your people, your viewers, your readers. Like what ABC and the Washington Post did to their people today is disgusting. Do you want political violence? The left goes nuts when they unexpectedly lose. We always talk about January 6th in this modern context. That is nothing compared to what Democrats do when they lose. I mean, I'm 43 years old. I remember Bush v. Gore. I am 43 years old. I remember what they did after Kerry lost, and they really thought they were going to win. And of course, I'm old enough to remember them turning over cars and burning down businesses in Washington, D.C. when Donald Trump won in 16. I remember that was on Inauguration Day. I remember after he won, when he was president-elect, they were in every major city, hurting police officers, ruining neighborhoods. And that is because they were taken off guard. And it's like 15 days. If they're not going to be responsible now, they're never going to be. So it leaves it, I guess, up to a few of us who have a pair of balls to actually tell you what's really going on. The fact of the matter is, they're coming up with these desperate little things because they know, like the Washington Post and ABC News knows, that if they would have polled this race today and legitimately, I'll even show you what they did with their wording. It's outrageous. It's outrageous what they did with their wording. But if they did it on purpose, it's absolutely on purpose. And by the way, in the past, 538 has actually posted statements and articles and, whatever you want to call them, blog posts, saying they do not use polls that do this because it's dishonest and it's not getting to the core of the question of who people are voting for. And yet they put these Washington Post polls in their model. Everybody's going to pull some level of bullshit in to avoid telling people what nobody wants to say out loud, which is this race really tied anymore? Is it? Like, if Donald Trump just gets his voters to vote, the most likely outcome at this point is that it probably isn't that close anymore. And I hate to tell you, because as a pollster, you can't really ever say it for sure. Biden thought he was going to win in a landslide. Democrats thought he was going to win in a landslide. But the And that's an argument to be made. But the problem with that argument is the groups that are difficult to poll, the ones that constantly throw us for a loop the most, pollsters for a loop, are not Democratic groups. And she's not doing well with them. So the only way that could be right is if somehow Donald Trump does not get all of these voters that have always come out to vote for him out to vote for him. The problem is right now in Pennsylvania, I did not vote in 2020 is like 25% almost a quarter of the mail-in vote. So like, I mean, I guess it could happen. I guess what we're hearing about with the early vote, this one's doing this party's got this much. The only thing I always caution you about the early vote tea leaves, the only thing that really it tells us much about is how little Democrats are voting compared to how much they voted for Hillary Clinton and how much especially they voted for Joe Biden. The Republican numbers aren't telling us much other than Republicans are doing a better job getting their voters to vote by mail. But that's another example. We're going to talk about Target Fart and his Mr. Boner at Target Fart and his bullshit every year. Here's a nice homework assignment for you. Go find me a cycle where Mr. Boner from Target Fart actually gave analysis that was negative for Democrats. You will not find it. Every year, his early voting models always show how well Democrats are doing. And then when he's wrong and you point it out, he blocks you. All right. So the fact of the matter is, it doesn't really matter how many election day voters and now early voters in Pennsylvania. That means nothing. And I'll get to that example in a second. It means nothing. What really matters is how many of them did not vote in 2020 and who is winning that vote or who has more of those voters in the electorate. Why? Because it changes the firewall. It changes the math entirely. If you bring out voters who did not vote in 2020 and you have the advantage with those voters, then guess what? Your firewall that you think you have is not going to hold. And that's what's going on in Pennsylvania right now. Sorry, folks, Gainesville, Florida is red, or Alachua County overall. My stomping ground. Republicans are currently outvoting Democrats. You know when I saw that last? Never. Except for a gubernatorial election in 22. How'd that work out? And then Nevada is a disaster for Democrats, and everybody knows it. All right. The 20,000 to 30,000 firewall is not there. They are running less than half of that right now. And their overall statewide lead, forget about just the Clark County firewall, the overall state vote lead is nowhere near sufficient. And the problem is that all of these trends we've been talking about for years, Democrats are bleeding registrations in Pennsylvania. They're bleeding registrations in North Carolina. They're bleeding registrations in Nevada. The problem when that happens is such. Look at Florida. Eventually, you no longer have the pool to go to make up that ground. So your firewall begins to get bigger as a requirement, but shrinks as a possibility. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? The firewall requirement gets bigger when that happens. We need X number of votes as a firewall, and they're not there. They're simply, you need to rely on the other party not voting. It's the only way to hit your firewall requirement. The problem is when you lose that edge or you lose it altogether or it shrinks, your firewall need gets bigger, but your possibility, your potential targets get smaller. That's what happened to Democrats in Florida. Everyone dismissed it for years until they hit the tipping point. And now we're here at the tipping point. All right, here's what the race looks like to one of the most accurate pollsters, as they say. This is the real trend. Maybe this is why the Washington Post wants to show you interviews from, I don't know, September 20th, September 28th, 29th, whatever. Because this is what the tip trend looks like. The question is now, what's it going to be tomorrow? Actually, not even. What's it going to be by the end of the week? That's the question we're asking ourselves. I would argue that was a response bias, and Harris never really had a 4-point lead. That's what I personally would argue. And then the environment started to stabilize a bit, the polling environment. But the fact of the matter is, at this point, the number of undecideds is so low. It's really a game of who is going to vote. Let me tell you who we think is going to vote. That's what the pollsters essentially say. As you can see, Trump nearly hit 50 yesterday. If we have time, I'll read the article. Their insight is incredible because they're basically telling you that there's a ceiling for her. There was a ceiling. And that's because you cannot be trailing on trust to handle all of these issues and expect if like you can't get above 42% on people's most important voting issues, you cannot expect to hold a 50 to 46 lead. You can't. All right. And in order to push all of this crap, let's play the clip from Menton and then we'll talk about why this is extremely dishonest. I've been talking about it for a while now, but they keep doing it. It's obviously a talking point. And at this point, the apples to oranges comparison is obvious. People who are smart enough, and if they're still doing it, if people who are smart like Harry, if they're still doing it, I'm sorry. They're doing it on purpose and they're giving Democrats talking points. At least the only good thing is now we know from those who simply regurgitate them, we now know who is legitimate and credible and who is honest and who is not. Any of those things. All right, let's play the clip.
Seen so many groups this year moving in Donald Trump's direction. So you would think his core group, his base of support would be doing the same. But in fact, it's moving a little bit away from him. So this is Trump's margin with non-college white voters. Unlike most voting blocs, this group is not moving towards him. It's actually moving slightly away. So you go back 8 years ago, he won him by 33. You go back 4 years ago, he won him by 31. Now what we look is we see that in the latest average of polls, he's only up by 27.
Bomb. Stop. Bomb, bomb, bomb. Did you hear it go off? Okay. Apples to oranges. First of all, a 33 and 31 point difference is not a big difference. That could be Edison Research's freaking sampling era, dude. All right. That is not some huge trend that you discovered with 2 points. All right. That's number one. Number two, Trump's support hasn't been understated in the past because they understated his support with non-whites. It is, in fact, a routine artifact in every poll in the Trump era when he's on the ballot, whatever you want to, it's not even an artifact. It is a repeat offense for pollsters to understate Trump's support with white voters. That goes for both educated and non-educated, college-educated white voters. All right. He's going to do worse against Hillary Clinton than he actually did. All right. And then come election day, and he winds up stomping her by a margin that Republicans haven't seen since Reagan stomped Mondale in '84. Nobody predicted that was going to happen except for me and a couple, maybe 2 other pollsters. Comparing his numbers to the polls and comparing his actual voting results to the polls now is misleading. Compare them to the polls in 2020. Compare them to what the poll said in 2016. The only credible, honest, and accurate way to deliver these numbers would be to show people what the polls say now versus what the polls said in 2016 and 2020 and how he actually performed. For the love of God, the New York Times had Donald Trump barely winning the white vote over Joe Biden. They had him losing white seniors, folks, losing seniors overall, but he was only winning the white vote by 6 points. Of course, he won the white vote by more than twice that margin. Nate Silver wrote an entire article about how Democrats are going to do so well with white working class this time. It did not happen. Joe Biden ended up doing marginally better than Hillary Clinton with the white working class, especially where he needed to in parts of Pennsylvania. But he did not perform as strongly among these groups, not even educated white voters. He did not perform either with them either as strongly as the polls suggested he would. This is disgustingly misleading. This has always been the question. Because of that history, if Donald Trump does as well as the polls actually suggest he's going to do with non-whites, and they do what they always do, which is understate him with white voters, then this election is not that close. That has always been the real legitimate question. Nobody is having a problem reaching educated white voters. And in fact, the problem is they're not reaching a diverse amount of white voters that even call themselves Democrats, for instance. Are your non-college white voters too liberal? Are they too Democrat? This has been the problem. These have been the routine problems. Not whether or not they're reaching enough Trump voters that are non-college and somehow she's just doing better. And you know that by the recalled vote margin, which, by the way, I'm going to show you in a second in Pennsylvania. And then I will show you how she is currently faring among voters that we targeted, trying to get Biden voters, likely Biden voters, to see whether or not Trump is winning more 2020 Biden voters. And of course, Harris is winning of Trump's 2020 vote. Spoiler alert, she is winning almost nothing from the Trump 2020 vote. Statistically insignificant. Nothing. And he is winning 3 times the number, or the percentage, not number, but really it's better to look at it as percentage of Biden voters. In the end of the day, it's not an exact science. So, the so-called targeted Biden voters came back a little bit too, people could be lying. But at the end of the day, it came back like 57-41. For a week, we had it more like 67-31. I don't know what the hell happened. Maybe people, because the race is moving in Trump's favor and it's moving so strongly, we're having a more difficult time finding people who are willing to admit that they voted for Joe Biden. But among those who do, wait till you see the numbers. So he is now comparing apples to oranges, and he's been doing it for the better part of 2 weeks. Why? They want to give you the illusion the race is closer than it is. For the same reason that ABC News and the Washington Post just released a poll that's a month old, without telling us how many of these interviews were conducted at the end of September. What percentage of the sample was even done in the month of October? And why did you wait over a week to release it? You polled for a month and waited a week to release it. These are not acceptable practices. If you have polled for such a long duration, folks, 2 words: rolling average. That ABC News Washington Post survey doesn't even meet the basic standards of disclosure laid out by APOR. Forget about the Transparency Initiative. Forget about it. They don't meet the basic standards of disclosure. And it's not even a ballot test. Why would you break from your longtime pollster? And why would you break from your longtime methodology to pull that bullshit? Why, when Harry's taking shit after shit on X and social media with everyone who understands what he's doing, calling him out, why would he continue to do it for over a week now? Let's keep playing.
Now, that may not seem like a lot, but given that we're seeing these double-digit gains, say, among black voters or among Hispanic voters and so
again, never was a problem. That was never the problem. Polls actually did understate Trump with non-whites as well, but that was reaching them and reaching certain types of voters within that subgroup has never been the main problem that has driven his understated support in the polls. And that has never been the issue. And you ever stop to think who is more likely to take these surveys? Who's more willing? Who has higher participation rates? The white working class is the core problem with polling today. Period. End of story. Something happened in 2020 and 22 and 24. We ran into a bunch of non-white voting blocks that just don't care. They're just admitting it after all of these years, after being one of the constant signal throwers for social bias indicators in 20. After all of these years of doing that, they finally are just like, I don't care. I'm voting for Trump. And they're not as, honestly, not as difficult to reach as some of these other, especially the white working class in areas like the Rust Belt. Very difficult to reach them.
Some of the polls, the fact that we're seeing this core group of supporters actually moving away from him, not just off of the 2016 baseline, but the 2020 baseline as well, I think that's a rather interesting development.
Shrinkage, as Donald Trump might say, based on what he said the last few days. Why could even a small difference with this group matter?
Why can a small difference with this group matter? Because look at what percentage of the electorate that they make up. So we can look nationally, right? Look at this. Non-college white voters make up 40% of the electorate. That's more than college whites at 29%. All other groups, voters of color at 28%. So this is something that we've seen throughout the board, right? Which is that Donald Trump is making huge gains with groups that make up a smaller percentage of the electorate while he's losing a little bit. But these groups that he's losing a little bit of make up a much larger portion of the electorate. But more than that, you know, we're talking about the US of A, where they make up 40%. Why don't you go to those key Great Lake battleground states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin? They have outsized import in those Great Lake battleground states. Non-college white voters, look at this. They make up the slim majority of voters at 51%, way more than college whites at 30%, way more than all other voters. It's
nationwide, for every point of the white vote a Republican loses, they have to make up with 6 points of the black vote. That does not even include Hispanic voters, which obviously we've seen an even bigger shift with. All right, as a share of the electorate, like, so if you're winning 27% of the Hispanic vote, but now suddenly you're winning in the 40s, you're obviously going to make up a lot more ground overall in net votes than if you were winning like 8% of the black vote. Now you're winning 12, right? So, or it's actually more than that. I'm just using obviously an example. All right. And then, by the way, a state like Pennsylvania, you know, non-college voters overall will make up 60% roughly. In Michigan, they'll make up 65%. But again, that has been the reason why these states have polled so badly in the past. Reaching these other voters has never been a problem. In fact, even among college whites, the problem has been that you're not reaching every, you know, you're not representing college whites well enough. You're overstating Democrat support with them as well. That even again happened in 22, even though the polls generally understated Democrats in some states. Nationally, they didn't. And Republicans did do better with voters that are white with a college degree. The problem is they didn't get enough of the non-college white vote out where they needed to get them out. And that's what understated Democratic support in some states. Well, again, then that leaves the question. Do we expect them not to come out for Donald Trump? Is that what we're arguing here? Are we seriously arguing that? Early vote tea leaves can be very misleading, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case from what we're seeing right now. Not at all. That looks a lot more non-college than it typically does. Early voting was a liberal non-white and college-educated white phenomena. That's why it leans so Democratic. That's not the case this time. And again, if we were talking about having a difficult time reaching white voters with a college degree, then that would be a danger sign and a warning sign for Donald Trump. But that is not the core of the problem. That is not the core reason polls have understated Donald Trump. He's comparing apples to oranges. Apples to oranges. If he was showing people, here's how Trump did in 16 and 20 with these groups, and here's what the polls suggest now. But here's what the polls suggested in 16 and 20 as well, and that didn't come to fruition. He did better with those groups. That would be the honest and transparent way to deliver this data. But he has now, for almost 2 weeks, routinely compared. CBS News did it, by the way, with their YouGov poll. If you remember, we talked about this on the show. They did it as well. I don't want to spend so much time on that. Oops, I removed the wrong thing. I don't want to spend so much time on that. I'd rather show you what we're seeing. So locals, here's how it ended yesterday, targeting Biden voters in Pennsylvania. All right. Well, we have 80 when we spoke. We got up to like one. Oh, I'm so glad it changed. Is there, let me just refresh. Oh, I did recently refresh it. So, okay. It could change as we're talking there because people do have time to complete. But, all right. It got up to nearly 200 interviews. We were attempting to target Biden likely voters on the phone and through text online. And this is what we got from the day. All right. And of course, we're polling Pennsylvania, but I'm separating a data set because what I'm trying to do is find another data point that confirms what we're seeing in the overall polling, right? So if this is true, we would see it if we targeted specifically Biden voters. All right. Something happened late afternoon. For a better part of almost a week that we've been doing this, collecting, like 120 to 200 interviews. Now, like 120 to like 180. That's probably better. That's probably more accurate. This subgroup of people we think are Biden voters or more likely with their profiled on, they're profiled on the model to look like they're, to be Biden voters. And then we pull random samples from the data set to do that, to pull them, right? For most of the week, this thing was coming in. Yes, I voted for Biden. 67% would tell us they voted for Biden. And around 30%, 29, right, 20, ballpark, would tell us that they voted for Trump. Something happened late afternoon, and that shifted pretty dramatically. As you can see, these people are very certain voters. These are high propensity voters. Wait till you see education, by the way. I've never voted is very, very small. So we know, obviously, that these were the model's working. The model's working because we're asking them, did they vote in 20, right? 97% of them said they did. In fact, I've never voted is only 1%. So we know that the model's doing its job. All right. And it came back, though, a lot less Biden this time. I don't know exactly yet what that reason is, but I suspect that part of it is reflecting the trajectory of this race, the trend of this race, and then also people lie. They lie. If they're Biden voters who now intend to vote for Trump, especially educated white voters, they will lie to you. All right? It's that simple. People do. I hate to be the one to break it to everybody. All right. Moving on. If we do the layout, okay, we did. All right. So, but still, only 41% said they voted for Trump. Another 1% Joe Jorgensen. Another 1% someone else. Very, very liberal sample to begin with. Anyway, Biden barely won the state of Pennsylvania, as we all know, about 60,000 votes and change. And obviously, here it's not 57 to 41. So Biden did not have a 16-point margin outside of some polls that suggested he would, but he did not. All right. It was very close. 29% said they strongly approved of the job that Joe Biden was doing as president. Another 20% said that they somewhat approved. So, folks, you're still looking at a bare majority support approval rating for Joe Biden among these voters. So, again, not anywhere near the overall electorate, which is currently sitting in Pennsylvania around 39 to 41%. Going down, this is because we have the same questionnaire for Michigan. They're just obviously being filtered out for Pennsylvania. Josh, but we are doing the same thing for Michigan, just not as much because you got to allocate resources where you got to allocate them, number one. Number two, Pennsylvania is that important. If Trump wins it, it is 95% certainty over. All right. So Josh Shapiro, as you can see, among these voters is very popular. Very popular. And then, okay, here's where the margin is now if the election was held today. You have Kamala Harris sliding from 57 to 52. All right. Let me just go back and make sure that is the latest. Yeah. 57% to 52. So a 5-point decline for Kamala Harris. And you have Trump rising 4 to 45. So among us, so folks, that's a 9-point shift. This is, I would say, but it's only 190 people, except the fact
that we have been seeing a 6 to now 9. That was a daily high. Normally it was as low as 6 and as high as 8. And that was generally the average was about just under 7. But now we're seeing upwards of a 9-point shift. So it's not simply a matter of, oh, but it's a small sample size. No, it's been consistent like this for now the better part of a week. Only yesterday was the biggest shift away from Harris since 2020. So obviously you're in a Biden plus 16 electorate. She's only got a 7-point lead. I'm just going to pause for a second and let you guys digest that. Let's take a look and see. And by the way, she is winning undecideds, but you would expect her to. Here is all the, obviously the, whoops. She actually falls even more when you include the other third-party candidates. You can see the actual candidates themselves. All right, she falls even more. Trump barely budges. So he at a minimum has increased support by about 3% among this group with a high of what? 4 or 5? What was it? Harris has collapsed from 57. And is it a little higher here? A tad higher. I mean, you're talking about one person. That's it. She gains one person. That's all. All right, let's look at some of the demographics of this group, shall we? And by the way, you can see here, the same thing is going on with Bob Casey. Dave McCormick took a lead for the first time. McCormick's even winning undecideds in this group. Folks, McCormick is winning or did win because the undecided group is shrinking. As of yesterday, I think undecideds in Pennsylvania were like 3%, maybe even less. Wait a minute. Let me bring up. No, it is less. It's like 2%, less than 2%. Yeah. Here is the numbers, the final. We weighted this and put it out when we were doing our locals stream. That's where it was. All in all said and done, when everybody's there's nobody is basically nobody undecided at this point. Now supporting Trump is 50%, supporting Harris 48. This is the likely voter, by the way, and it is with the leans a little bit less than 2%. I mean, there's nothing. It's not about persuasion anymore. It's about mobilization. And I mean, if Trump mobilizes these voters, he's going to win. I mean, there's a ceiling for her. You cannot lose this many Biden voters from 2020 and win the election unless you inject a huge number of new voters into the system. In Pennsylvania right now, the early vote, it's a little under 20% Democratic say that I did not vote in 2020. It's about a quarter of Republicans. So Republicans are winning the new voter, at least in the early vote, at least in the early vote. We don't know what it's going to be in the final here, but really nothing suggests, no polling, no turnout data so far, nothing. There is no data point to suggest that Harris is going to benefit like Biden benefited from an injection of new voters that are favorable to her. The new voter has favored Trump for a long time in this race. It's going to vary. Maybe it's 3.5, 4 points in Pennsylvania, but it could be, 10 points in Florida, 15 points in Florida. But almost nowhere. I can't recall a single poll or a single data set or anything that is suggesting that new voters are favoring Harris anywhere. Virginia. There's no party registration, but we can infer and model. Georgia. Look at Nevada. Where, by the way, again, in a slightly bigger margin than in Pennsylvania, those I did not vote in 2020 voters are favoring Republicans. And it could change. It could. But there's 2 weeks left. Democrats don't suddenly become election day voters. The data on this is very clear. Empirical studies show that voters listen to the party strategy, what the leaders push for voting. Democrats have never pushed the strategy of getting an election day surge to the ballot box. I'm talking about this cycle. Of course, if we were to go back to like 04, of course they did that and they did it well, but not now. All right. So among this group, even McCormick is winning leaners when actually, as you saw before, Trump is not. So you can see that McCormick does have some very educated vote that Trump isn't winning, even though Trump is still outperforming him because, of course, Pennsylvania is still 62% non-college, or it will be around 60%. And Trump is doing better with them than McCormick is even doing. So it all offsets, like Harry just said. Those voters, they do a lot more when they shift because there are a lot more of them. They have a larger impact on the overall result. That's one thing he is right about. All right, moving on. I really want to show you the. Actually, let's look at that. I'm curious how well she's doing. Look, she's not even doing that well with trust to handle among these voters. She barely has a lead with some of these things. Immigration. I mean, look at that. And we know what immigration is statewide. Trump has a massive lead. It's like 20 points. All right, the most important issue for them is going to be abortion, I bet. Actually, it's not. Oh, my God. It's not. Inflation and cost of living is. And that's probably why it's a net shift of 9 points to Trump. Next to that, threats to democracy and corruption. That's actually more than abortion. That doesn't surprise me, considering who we're talking about. And who are we talking about? Look at how ideological, look at how liberal these voters are. Moderate, actually. But, I mean, it's liberal is actually pretty close to right. But Pennsylvania, folks, was like 38% conservative in 2020. It's 22% in the sample. That's it. Look at how moderate it is. Obviously, where do you think it comes from? Even though the Republican sample is still America first. Look at the independents. I don't want to go past this, but would you say your views more closely align with Democrats or Republicans? Look at that. I mean, look at that. It's a very big advantage. It's actually a little bit male. But what about by race? It's white. It's Pennsylvania. What do you expect? It's American. German's only 9. That tells you how underrepresented some of the Trump vote is. We know this by ethnicity. I want to get into it. But look at education. Look at education. High school or GED. 11%. That's it. There was literally one person interviewed who has a pre-high or secondary level education. Graduate degree is 25% of this sample. Bachelor degree is 31.4% of this sample. Even among those who are some college associates, 32, it is a heavy share of the electorate in Pennsylvania. I mean, my God, folks. My God. Pennsylvania will be like 13% postgraduate, folks. I mean, that's it. 15, maybe. Democrats are lucky. 16, let's give them 16. Whatever. 20, let's do 15, 25 to make it 16-40. 60-40. 15% post-grad, 25% 4-year, making 40% with a 4-year or higher. And then 60% will be, maybe some college, but no 4-year degree. I mean, obviously, this is already way too much. It is 56% 4-year degree or more. So, I mean, like I said, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect science, but obviously the modeling did its job here. We wanted likely Biden voters from 2020. Almost the entire sample was like, yep, you're right. I voted in 2020. Up until yesterday, it was normally, 67 to 30 in favor of Harris. That collapsed as of yesterday. Some of it is without a doubt people who have changed their mind and now they are lying. And they are saying, I voted for Trump. Yeah, I actually did. No, you didn't. In fact, we know if the electorate looked like this, it would not be Biden plus 16. I don't know. I don't know what you would have to do. I'd have to do some math real quick, but have to play around with some weight variables and see, like, what would it take? I bet you actually it would probably be like, I don't know, Biden plus 22 maybe, ballpark. I don't know. I'd have to do that. I don't want to make any claim unless I actually did the math, but obviously it is a more, there are people lying. That's my point. There are people lying. Let's look by income. Look at that. 34% making 100 to 200. Psst, right. Sure. 19% who make 200,000 or more. Yeah, okay. So obviously the modeling is doing its job. Just so people understand, this is like 5 to 7% in the electorate in its entirety. Labor unions 81. Most of it is public, 64 to 22. That's probably right around. It's actually pretty well married, but only 5.3 are widowed. Actually, it surprised me considering how old Pennsylvania is. It is an older state. 20, a little less Catholic, and a little less Protestant. No religion's higher than it actually is. But again, you would expect that. Obviously not evangelical at all. You get the point. Pretty damn suburban. Rural areas. I don't know, man. The EP Vocast had a lot more rural vote in Pennsylvania than the Edisons. That's why you really got to be careful how you weight by geography. It is not smart to just take area type. And number one, most people don't know their correct area type. That's number one. And number two, the census recently changed the definition of an urban area. So, like, how are you going to weight it to prior examples from 2020 when the same definition wasn't even used? No. Better ways to do it. And then if you look by county, you can see Allegheny is a little bit more of the vote than it should be. Allegheny is about 10. It's about 12.2. That's not bad. Philadelphia is actually a little bit low. But Montgomery, look at that. Bucks is almost, actually, that's pretty close. Northampton, Butler, York, Chester, Lehigh. These make up some of the top counties we got going on in here, as you can see. All right. So, I mean, what you would expect, honestly. Again, you simply cannot lose that much of your vote in a state you barely won and expect to win the state. Oh, that's right. Let's go to the, where are you? Where are you? Here it is. Let's go to the non-college vote. Let me put it back up on the screen for you so you can see it better. Let's go to the non-college vote. Let's scroll back up. I'm not just talking about whites. Let's do it all. Okay. Thinking back, as you can see, Trump won them, but you can see Biden won about 40% of them. Did you see that? 40 and change? Right. Now let's go to Harris. 64 to 32. I did not choose white. I just chose no college degree. Let's add some college and associates with it. Make sure that's in there. And you're going to see her pop up a little bit. All right. And there you go. But still lower than where obviously Biden was, I guarantee it. Where are you? There you go. 46 to 42. So like a 4-point decline. Oh, 43.9. Okay. So, as you can see, I mean, even some of this decline is among obviously some without a college degree and some with a college degree. It's just not, again, it's too big of a, like, if Barnes was here right now, Barnes would, he's always a little more bullish than I am. By the way, I texted Barnes after the show. Where are you, dude? I know you're in here somewhere. I texted Barnes after the show and I said, what was your national again? What was your national? And he was like, +2, bro. Remember, I revised it. I was like, damn it, I'm drinking. Because I'm at the point now where I absolutely, it's possible Trump wins the popular vote by 2 points. I mean, that's well within reason. What is it? Atlas has Trump up by 3. Tip had him up by 3 yesterday. It's now Trump +1. Be interesting to see how Tip fares this cycle, because you cannot just jump into some of these new methodologies. By the way, the Washington Post poll, let's talk about that. All of a sudden, some of the things the Washington Post poll did are totally legitimate. Even when we were trying to do it in a different way, I would argue a more credible way, they all claimed that it wasn't a credible way to do a poll, right? So now it's perfectly fine because they're doing it. Repeat interviews, yada, 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 yada. All right. Let's read it and tell you, oh my. Let me count the ways why this is trash. By the way, Peppers, thanks. Rika, thanks. You guys gifting members. That's awesome. Pepper says we're getting to the point we need a moderator in here. We're having to defend against both Kamala trolls and concern trolls. Look, I feel bad for them because someone's got to tell them the real status of this race. And again, I'm not saying like this is 100% certain, but the race is clearly moved in Donald Trump's direction to the point where he is in the driver's seat. Harris has, and listen, this is what pisses me off, Peppers, because they don't tell people, they don't tell their own people the truth. And then behind the scenes, right? They'll tell you, we know we're down. We know we are. But our ground game's more and we have more money. We're going to make it up. Our ground game's good for 3 points. We're going to make it up. That is what they're saying. They know they're down. They know they are. I wish they would just be honest with their own people. And there's a point where, like, you got to keep people's spirits up, but that's not what this is. This is gaslighting bullshit. Look at this. The Washington Post Schar School Deciders poll was conducted September 30th to October 15th. Holy shit. Folks, you stay in the field for nearly 3 weeks, right? Which already is problematic and highly controversial in the polling industry. Why? Because some will argue polls are snapshots in time, right? Public opinion changes. Then you have people like me who say, yes, that's true, but it doesn't change as much as public polls give the impression it does. However, what does change is the polling environment. Social biases change. Response biases change. Various forms of cognitive biases change. The environment that houses them changes. So conducting a poll starting September 30th and ending on the 15th already, even if all things were equal, is already garbage. It's garbage. Everyone knows how the environment was. There have been pollsters on the left and the right talking about it for weeks. Everybody knows this. That's not the only problem. How many? Okay, well, first of all, among a stratified random sample of 5,016 registered voters in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. That includes 1,252 voters who participated in a similar survey in April and May. All right, so 20% roughly of your sample is repeat interviews. That's funny. 22% is repeat interviews. I thought repeat interviews wasn't a legitimate way to conduct a poll. Why am I bringing this up? The PPD tracking poll from 2016 was trashed, called fake, called not credible, experimental as the best word it was called. And one of the main reasons is that because anywhere between 25 and 33% of our sample was targeted to be repeat interviews. People that we really did believe were part of persuadables, those who were independents but were soft independents, et cetera, or just soft party, And we wanted to know, and actually what we were doing was trying to prove that, in fact, public opinion does not move, like the ABC Washington Post poll claimed it did, from Clinton plus 14 to Clinton plus, 4 or 3 before Election Day. And actually, it moved back to Clinton toward the end. It tightened to 2 points, then moved back to Clinton, even though the entire race was moving only in one direction. How many of these interviews were conducted on September 30th? How many of these interviews, how much of that entire sample, which already is weird, but how much of that entire sample was conducted from September 30th to, say, October 7th? And if we went back in a time machine, what would Robert and I and others be talking about during that time period when it came to polling? Let's count the states too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 states, and the sample size is only 5,000 voters. Registered. Registered. Do the math. Does that meet the minimum sample size requirement at Big Data Poll for these states? No way. Nevada and Wisconsin are smaller states. They are. And you can get away with like 700 registered voters. Pennsylvania is big. Georgia is big. You need a lot more than that, especially given how poor the response rates were. That's already one of the problems. One of the problems. And they just stratify to try to extrapolate what they learned from the battleground states to apply it to the nation overall. And then here's the problem. All right. Here's another problem. Where are we? Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Looking ahead to November's presidential election, in which Joe Biden is the Democratic nominee and Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, compared to, obviously, because the poll's so old, they had to swap this question. How likely are you to vote for each of the following candidates in the presidential election in November? Definitely vote for, probably vote for, probably not vote for, definitely not vote for. Some of you have been watching me a long time are already going to know what I'm going to say. Some of you, maybe you have not watched me for a long time, are about to learn something. That's not a valid question. This is the way Patrick Murray pulled his bullshit. He's always wrong, by the way. He actually, even though they're saying they rate him high on their stupid little cheesy pollster scorecard nobody gives a shit about. They rate him high on it, but they did not include him in the model when it came to their forecast of who's going to win, because as they themselves at 538 have stated, that is not a ballot question, and it is not indicative of vote share. It's not predictive of vote share. This is essentially a twisted ass Likert scale trying to be applied to a ballot question. They don't, or let me put it this way, they haven't done this in the past. Why would they do this now? There are multiple things they have never done in the past for this poll, and they decided this election to do now. Number one, that. The proper way to ask that question is the way that you just saw it on ours. If the 2024 U.S. presidential election were held today, for whom would you vote? And if they are undecided, if you had to decide today, for whom would you vote? Or some variation of a legitimate, valid question. This is not one, my friends, and not one you would see if you clicked on their polls from 2020 or 2016. Now, if they say Donald Trump, you could be like, how likely or how is your mind made up? I mean, are you definitely voting for him? If you probably, then you could pry through the ballot question like that, and that's totally legitimate. But this is not a ballot question, and it is not predictive of vote shares, which is probably why Monmouth was wrong all those years. They decided to do it this way this time. You will also not go back in 2020 or 2016 and find that they conducted a poll damn near a month ago and then decided to release the results of that poll a month later, almost a week after they exited the field. What possible motive could you have to do either one of these things? You also will not find an example of when 20+% of their sample size was a repeat interview or return calls. You will not find it. So what reason, again, what motive would you have to do this? I don't know. Let me just say it out loud. You're trying to find Harris voters from your prior polls? Not that you want to know about opinion legitimately changing. You're trying to find Harris voters from your prior polls. Why would you hold the results back? Narrative. Pure and simple narrative. Because you know public and private polls are showing the race is not really only moving in Donald Trump's direction, but she's basically down everywhere. And you want to inject this bullshit to give a false impression that the race is still some kind of a toss-up. The top lines may look like a toss-up, but the trend is clear. And they have Harris leading in some of these states. It's truly unbelievable. They are literally now the only poll showing Harris up in some of these states. Why? I don't know. If you go to the RCP average, you'll probably see a couple other ones that have Harris up in some of these states. A month ago. And you might actually notice that Trump is doing significantly better in the definitely. Barnes and I have talked about this before ad nauseum. This is why you do pry after asking the ballot question, because those who are most certain, who are most enthusiastic, who are definitely going to vote for candidate A are also much more likely to show up in self-reported voting intent. Period. End of story. That's why you're seeing Trump 50 to 45 in Arizona, for instance. Well, that's a lot closer to the results of the other races. Not when you have all of these put together. It shows a much closer race. Georgia is just all up. They're literally the only poll now that has Harris up in Georgia. Like, I don't know where they're getting this. Michigan. Harris is down until you play around and not ask a legitimate ballot question. Then all of a sudden you can get her to 49, 47 with those probablys. Nevada, that actually helps Trump in that case, which is why I'm Nevada skeptical. Although even we do have Trump ahead in Nevada. It's close, but he is ahead. North Carolina's Trump's by pretty much a mile until you do that. And et cetera, et cetera. And why would you ask differently for the states than you do your national poll? Why would you decide to word the question for president differently in your state polls than you do in your national polls? Why would you do that? I'm being facetious here. All right. These are hypothetical questions we all know the answer to. They did this to give people the impression and to prop Harris up. Give people the impression that this race is not running away from her, that she hasn't slid considerably from a month ago. Well, I guess because you just released data that's from last month without telling us how much of the sample is from September, how much of it is from the first week of October. Listen, the gold standard in polling and presidential polling was who, until they eventually quit the horse race business and decided, I no longer want to do this because I don't want to mislead people. And it's simply in this world today, it is our confidence level is not high enough to continue to do this. What we have done for over a half a century. Gallup. And what did Gallup do? When because they tracked daily. What did Gallup do? Did they weight more recent responses more heavily? No. Did they include interviews from 3 weeks ago in their top line recent margins? No. That's called stale data. They did a 7-day rolling average before Labor Day, and they did a 3-day rolling average after Labor Day. Why? Why? Give me a break, folks. Give me a break. I was talking with somebody in the biz. We were going over how there were no polls a weekend that's 2 weeks out from election day. Politico themselves wrote an article about where are the polls from pollster A, pollster B, pollster C. This time in 2020, X number of polls were released. This time in 2016 and this weekend, X number of polls were. Where is the polling? Why isn't it coming hot and heavy anymore? We had a Biden plus double digit in a battleground state every day in 2020. Go back and look. Every day. During the weekends, in the entire month of October, the Sunday shows were consumed with new rounds of polling from different news agencies. Essentially, we're in a drought. We're in a polling drought in the middle of what everyone knows is a trend, a surge being enjoyed by Donald Trump. I don't know how much of this is due to the failed business model that is the corporate media, where the truth is not necessarily profitable for them. That's not what's profitable. That's not what motivates them. They need headlines. They need stories. They need horse races. By the way, I thought we settled this long duration polling debate in 2016. Like I literally bet, if you guys, and I'm not a betting man, I literally bet the firm on Indiana primary race for the Republican nomination. I literally bet the firm against a pollster, a well-known pollster from Indiana. They had Cruz up by like 2 or something. The poll was conducted over a month. I was like, you win, you're right, and I'm wrong. I will shut the doors right now. I'll shut them. You cannot do that. If we were a stable political environment with one mode of collection to reach people, then I would argue it's probably easier and we can demonstrate that opinion really doesn't move like that. But that's not the environment we're in. We live in an environment with fake narratives and fake bumps, artificially created with the hopes of what is the equivalent of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You say something long enough, you repeat this bullshit long enough, maybe you can make it a reality. That is what the media does to help Democrats run modern presidential and senatorial and every other campaign you can think of. The media essentially does run Democratic campaigns in the modern era. It's just true. They certainly run their messaging. They certainly run their attack ads. I mean, that's what they're giving them. Free attack ads, in-kind campaign contributions that are illegal, but that is what they're doing. We don't live, unfortunately, in that stable environment anymore. And they create these high response bias environments, high social bias environments. And by the way, they're all formed the same kind of cognitive, really. And that's known. I mean, this isn't really disputed. So to do this, I'm talking to a buddy over the weekend, and I'm like, he's getting ready to see what they put out, where are the polls, where's everything. And we're actually like, what the call originally was, hey, you are still polling, right? And I was like, yeah, I just got off with other pollsters who were asking me the same thing. Like, why is everybody dumping a final poll? Like Marist isn't going to poll again. That's it. Why? They always dump their final poll like on the first or second day of November. Why now? Why are they doing this now? I think we all know the answer to it. So we were kind of speculating about the deceitful bullshit we were going to be subjected to over the next 2 weeks. And this really just took the cake. Like, this exceeded expectations. A twisted ass Likert score instead of an actual ballot test, reported as a ballot test. A sample that was collected at the end of last month. An unknown number of it, by the way. That's a whole other one. We got to add another finger here. Unbelievable. With inadequate sample sizes for everything, by the way. If you can't see it, then I'm sorry. But this should be widely denounced. They should have kept Gary, and they should have let Gary do his thing. Give him the guy a chance to redeem himself after his Biden plus 17s in Wisconsin in 2020. Remain consistent. If Gary wanted to add text to online or online panels or something like that, they should have let him stick to his own thing. This is Reuters Ipsos right here. That's what this is. I wouldn't even want my name attached to it. You change my methodology that much. You change my my data sourcing. Then I'm just done. I'm done. Like, I'm not putting my name to it. No, thank you. No way. All right. Very, very obvious example of using a poll for propaganda and narrative manipulation. And I hate being forced to say that. Everyone thinks I'm some kind of troublemaker or something like that. Like, oh, I'm going to give him an F on my corny ass little pollster scorecard. I'll teach him a lesson. I don't give a shit about your pollster scorecard. You think I like doing this to you people? I don't. I would rather you all just be honest. This is bullshit, and everybody knows it. Toilet paper is actually worth more than this. And then they'll claim, by the way, they will claim that they weren't really wrong. At that time, Harris was doing well. I guess that race really did move toward Trump a lot closer in the end. So they're hedging. So if they can pull it off, they can say, see, we were right and everyone overstated Trump this time. They're hedging. But if they're wrong, which the trend line obviously suggests is the much more likely scenario, then they'll just say, but we did mention that those interviews, we started to conduct them in late September. So it probably was still during the response bias era, like Nate Cohn did at the New York Times. Yeah, actually, I don't really think Harris does have that lead in Pennsylvania. We conducted the poll during the height of a response bias. Okay, where was that in the fucking headline? Cook Politico, too. Our poll did show Harris up, but you know what? Trump is favored. What? One damn cycle. Can we just have one cycle without this bullshit? If you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, you're wrong. You're only human. No one's going to fault you for trying to do your best and being wrong. No one can be right all the time. It's impossible. But this is something else. This is Latin America level manipulation of narrative using polls. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. Ruling party in Mexico had no shot. They put out bullshit polls to make it look like they had a chance because they were going to manipulate the vote, and they were trying to help them manipulate the vote, depress the opposition party. They built a program to skew it all, and they put out crap like this. This is third world level shit. Come on. Do so much better than this. And if you're going to do it and release it, then fine. And just say, you know what? But polls clearly show the race has changed considerably since last month. That's not what they did. Those are headlines on a Monday, by the way. On a Monday, they dropped this. Not over the weekend for it to be scrutinized by the Sunday shows and the pundits and the pollsters that go on TV and talk radio and all these other programs that have become staple of election seasons. Oh, no. They did it Monday to avoid the scrutiny. This is so transparent. It's got to be denounced by like everybody. Not people who are perceived on the right. Hate the Republican Party, by the way. I don't know where you people get that shit from. Don't pretend you know me. You don't fucking know me. Can't stand them. I generally dislike everybody. Except the voter is sovereign and has to be respected. And good old George was right. This job is like there's something very sacred about it. You don't pull this shit. I'm over my time. All right. All right, amigos. 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. We'll be doing What Are the Odds with Barnes. He's got his own stuff to add, no doubt. And we'll also look at Florida and some of our other polling. I know I got a boogie woogie. I got to go get my kid right now. All right. So, number love for all of you. We will see you tomorrow at 2 p.m. Locals, keep your eye to the page. I'm out, peeps. What do you got to say, Laura?
Cheers.